Welcome to Fruiting Body Podcast, Episode 9. Today we're with Shaun Kober. Shaun is working at Tiger Muay Thai as the head coach of strength and conditioning, specifically with Petr Yan. Just a little background before we jump into it. We are Fruiting Body. Fruiting Body is a medicinal mushroom company. We're doing mushrooms such as reishi, lion's mane, cordyceps, and whatnot. Without further ado, let's get this started. Just a quick note before we jump into this. We found this pretty dope feature on YouTube. If you're watching this video and you click on any time place on the video itself, click on the description and chapters will appear. From these chapters, you can decide what part of the podcast you would like to watch. Hope you enjoy. Today we'll be discussing with Shaun Kober. He is from Tiger Muay Thai, the head strength and conditioning coach. He's also working with Swiss 8 and Be Spunky. We'll get a little bit into that as well. Shaun wears many hats. Lance Corporal Shaun Miller Kober, correct? Got it. Killed
Nailed it, bro.
Smashed it. He's also a nutritional therapist. And we'll discuss this because I'm not 100% understanding it yet. NLP master practitioner, neuro-linguistic programming. So we're going to get into that and understand that a little bit more. So let's get this started. So first, Shaun, thank you for joining us today. And kind of how we start these podcasts, the whole point of it is we want to understand your journey coming from Australia and how you got to Phuket. Now that's going to probably be quite long-winded, but take it away.
I'll try and keep it short and quick and straight to the point. So I'm ex-military. I spent 6 years in the Army. Once I discharged from the Army in 2012, I essentially started my strength and conditioning business, personal training business, and would work for 8 or 9 months every year and then travel for 3 to 4 months every year. 2013, my now ex-girlfriend and I went traveling around Southeast Asia and ended up about a month into our trip in Thailand. Spent a couple of days in Patong, hated it. Ended up going over to Tiger Muay Thai and spending a week there training, then continuing our travels, PP Islands, Koh Tao, up to Bangkok and across to Cambodia, Vietnam, etc. So after that, 3 months in Southeast Asia, we spent 3 months traveling around Europe. On the way home to Tasmania in Australia, we decided to stop back off in Phuket and train again at Tiger Muay Thai for 2 weeks. We wrote up our resumes, put forward job applications so that we could essentially get off the plane in Tasmania and walk into our new jobs. And then the next couple of years, I kept coming back for a month. So again, my girlfriend at the time and we'd work for 8 or 9 months every year.
This is 2013?
2013, yep. And that first trip, we came back twice, and I was like, I love this place. I'd love to, settle here for at least 6 months to a year. And every year I'd come back and spend a month here. My girlfriend at the time would go and do yoga courses in India or Bali or other islands in Thailand. And then 2017, I decided that I wanted to move over here. I wasn't getting the opportunities that I wanted with working with professional athletes where I was. So I ended up coming over to Thailand then, and my ex didn't want to come. She wanted to stay where she was. She was in a really good position. So we ended up going our separate ways, and I moved over here and took up an internship contract at Tiger Muay Thai.
So you were in Tasmania at the time before jumping over here?
Yes. Okay,
so we know a little bit about your backstory. We've done our research. Now, let's prolong this introduction of your life story. You went from Darwin initially, then you went down to Sydney, and eventually to Tasmania. Let's jump all that part of the story, and we'll come back to that later, kind of like a Quentin Tarantino film. But what were you doing specifically in Tasmania, kind of making that leap back and forth between Thailand? Was it purely military, or were you training as well?
No, so I'd already discharged from the army in 2012. I got back from Afghanistan in 2011, met a girl, she happened to be from Tasmania and she was moving back home.
Yep.
So I ended up following her down there and basically just like selling everything that I owned, packing everything up, and following her down there to, you know, give that relationship a chance. And we spent 5 years together, and I just recently finished my PT course and then moved to Tasmania. I better start my business or get a job somewhere. So I ended up starting my own business and then went strength and conditioning, nutritional therapist, NLP, more and more courses, etc. Built my own business, and that was a really solid growth part of my life, particularly for my coaching career. You know, I wasn't super busy. I had a lot of time to study, but not only study, you know, implement the tools that I'd learned through all these multiple courses with myself, with my clients. So, it was an awesome lifestyle. But after 5 years of living that lifestyle, I was like, all right, I don't have the opportunities that I wish I had or I want to have. I'm not getting the opportunities to work with professional athletes like I want. So, you know, whilst the lifestyle was amazing, it also meant that I was sacrificing other things. So it got to a point where, you know, my values had changed, and I had to make a decision to step away from that lifestyle, that relationship, so I could chase up opportunities. What was
that moment, that aha moment? Because let's say you're going between Phuket and Tasmania for almost 4 years, 2012, 13 to 17.
Yeah, not just Phuket. Like I'd come here for a month and then train, and then, you know, I was building my website and doing courses and things like that, and then I'd go traveling, you know, whatever, South America or through the Himalayas, India. But
can you remember that time, maybe you were in Tasmania or you were traveling, where you said, you know what, fuck it, I'm going to Phuket, I'm going to pursue this, I'm going to attempt to get a job at Tiger Muay Thai and get involved there? Do you remember the day, the time, or how that all came together?
I recall I was still Army Reserves at the time, basically, so I could play rugby. So I was away for a rugby trip. So I played for a brigade tournament, and then the best players got selected for the Army team, and then they went into camp, played against Navy and Air Force. So I was essentially away for a month, and every year this happened. 2017 stood out for me though, because I'd gone from being on the Gold Coast, you know, in May where it was winter.
Yeah.
But we're going to training twice a day. We're playing games every couple of days. We're on the beach every day doing recovery sessions, you know, 24, 25 degrees. And then I left that environment where I was with my friends and all that, where I went back to Tasmania, where, you know, I was with my girlfriend at the time, but I didn't have any friends there. I had friends in the rugby clubs and things like that, but no one like really close, not my tribe, so to speak. And I remember driving to work at like 5:45 on a Monday morning, and it was like 3 degrees, and I'm like, what the fuck am I doing here? Yeah. So yeah, no, there's a number of things that led up to that point, but yeah, you know, my ex-girlfriend and I, we'd had these conversations throughout the earlier parts of the year about what we were doing, where we want to go, and, you know, what we were looking at with travel and things like that. And I'd already reached out to Tiger, and a couple of other gyms as well. Tiger Muay Thai, I reached out to Unit 27 and Titan Fitness, where I'd guest coached the year before, whilst I was here for 1 month. So I started reaching back out to those gyms again. And yeah, the relationship got a little bit rocky, and I remember having a phone call with my ex whilst I was on that rugby trip, and I was like, all right, we need to have an adult conversation when I get home. And yeah, that conversation occurred. And
how quick from that conversation, and I think a lot of people have this story when they they go to live abroad. For me, it's quite quick. Mm-hmm. I mean, you don't really sit on it for a couple months or a year. Did you make that transition quite quickly after that conversation?
I was a month.
Yeah, see,
I got back from that. Yeah. I got back from that 1 month rugby tour, and then we'd booked a trip to go away for the weekend, and it was a road trip. And I was like, all right, we're leaving on a Friday. We're going to come back. We're going to have a good weekend. We'll have this conversation on Sunday when we're driving home. Yeah. She decided to have that conversation on the Friday, and I was like, all right, cool, let's do this. So, you know, it was a really good conversation. It was an adult conversation. Nobody raised their voice, and we just said it how it was. And, you know, and essentially it was like our values are no longer aligned. Yeah. We're no longer moving in the same direction that we were in the past. And, you know, it required a lot of honesty and discipline to have that honest conversation with each other and with ourselves, you know, to understand that everything that we were working towards together in the past was no longer aligned and moving in the same direction.
Just that point of time it worked, and, you know, things change.
Yeah,
change.
Yeah, exactly. So,
was she doing a job that would give her that flexibility to be able to move with you, or was she kind of stuck to the island of Tasmania?
Yeah, no, she owned her own business as well. She was also a personal trainer and a yoga teacher and yoga instructor. So she was running yoga courses and things like that. So, we had that conversation, and I basically said, all right, well, I need a little bit of time to, you know, tie up my loose ends and finish up what I'm doing here and give my clients notice, give the gym notice, and basically, you know, reach out to Tiger, reach out to Unit 27 Titan and say, hey, because I'd actually initially planned on coming over in like August, September. And this occurred in that conversation occurred mid-May, and then I ended up landing in Thailand, in Phuket, on the, I think, 22nd or 23rd of June.
Was it quite easy to get that job at that time? They're welcoming, positions were opened?
So I'd been actually reaching out to all of the gyms every year when I was coming back over to train. So, you know, I'd been networking for 4 or 5 years prior to that, training at the different gyms, talking to different people and expressing my interest in any positions that came up, handing in my resume, emailing cover letters, et cetera, et cetera.
So at least you're a familiar face. They know who you are.
Yeah. So, you know, timing worked in my favor. I think Tiger had just had 2 coaches that had just recently resigned. And initially I was asked to come over a little bit earlier in, I think, May or something. And I was like, no, I need a couple of months to sort this out. You know, my girlfriend and I are going to be traveling, so I'm going to be over at this time. And then obviously we had that conversation, and then I reached back out and said, hey, I've had a change in circumstances. I can be there in a month. And they're like, yeah, sweet.
Yeah, come on over. And especially it's probably getting low season, so the doors open a little bit more. It's more flexible to get in. So you've been here since 2007. I've been here since 2016. You've been here since 2017. And where do you see yourself? Do you see yourself staying? What's the next step for you? Or maybe, I don't know if you can announce that on here.
Yeah. I love it here. Yeah. I love it here. I'm staying here, you know, long term. I've got a plan for the next 3 to 5 years in what I'm doing with myself, with my own business, and also what I'm looking to develop at Tiger as well. So I won't say too much on that at the moment, but watch this space.
Okay. Now, you have your own YouTube channel as well, and your own podcast. And this started, if I'm correct, May last year.
Correct.
Approximately May last year. Now, you've been doing that for just over a year. What brought that together? How did you get into, let's say, podcasting initially, which I'm assuming kind of tied into the YouTube as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So as a coach, I get a lot of black and white questions, and, you know, people expect black and white answers. And it's like, man, I don't know anything about you. I don't know your training history. I don't know your training experience. I don't know injury history. I don't know diet history, blah, 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 blah. So people would ask me these questions like, you know, how many times should I be training a day? What type of training should I be doing? How should I be eating? This and that. And I'm like, it's really difficult to give you, you know, a specific answer when I need to ask like 5 questions before I can provide an answer, you know, because at the end of the day, like as a coach, we need to ask questions so that we can then make an informed decision. So I felt like I was kind of doing a disservice to people when I'm like, hey, I can't really answer that. So then I was like, maybe if I have something that I can reference or send a link to people to give them an understanding of the considerations that I'm looking at as a coach. And that's kind of how the idea of the podcast started. And I'd had ideas about it for probably 7, 8, 9, 10 months or so prior to actually kicking off. But the catalyst for actually starting the podcast was late January, February last year. I went back to, I had a 6-week holiday. I went to Japan, caught up with a couple of mates, went snowboarding there, went to Bali, went diving, caught up with some friends, did some training, and then went back to Australia, did my yoga course for a couple of weeks. And whilst I was there, I'd already had ideas of starting a podcast. I looked around at, for equipment in Thailand, couldn't really find too much. So whilst I was in Australia, the day before I flew back to Thailand, I ended up buying like all of the equipment that I needed. I'd obviously done some research, and I'd purchased a podcast course that I was planning on like working my way through over the next 6 months before putting content together and launching. And about 10 days after I arrived back in Thailand, everything went into lockdown. So I was like, now's as good a time as any.
Exactly. Now you have, that's kind of how this came together as well. If you have that free time, I mean, you can kind of just run with it. And that's basically what we did as well. It sounds like on your side, and I mean, it's kind of a rhetoric question. You're very disciplined, and you do like structure. And I'm just bringing that back to even the fact that you enrolled yourself in a podcast course. Did you find that to have any value? And maybe this is a two-part question. And what would you recommend to anyone looking to start their first podcast before kickstarting? Maybe you can walk them through that process.
Oh, all right. This is a loaded question. So I listen to a lot of podcasts myself, and I have been for probably 5 or 6 years. And that started because I lived on the outskirts of the city, and I drive into work, and also I drive into the outskirts of the city, and then like walk into work. And I was just sick of listening to the radio of like some 25-year-old nobody tell me their opinion of the Kardashians. And I was like, I felt dumber getting out of the car every day. So I was like, there's got to be better things to do with my time. So I actually started listening to podcasts and, bounced around to a number of different podcasts. And then I found a number of really good content producers that I liked and I resonated with. So I stuck with them. And I've just kind of taken things that I like from them and things that I dislike from them, and I've just kind of amalgamated it all into my own process, I guess. So obviously my plan was to do the podcast course, learn what I need to learn prior to creating content.
Kind of just the fundamentals.
Yeah, exactly. But as it turns out, I had the time to be able to start creating content, and I was like, well, it's all well and good to go through this course and learn this stuff, but I need to also action it. So I just started recording episodes, and, I'd already had a online coaching business for a number of years. And, I do a 12-week block. So there's a weekly email. So I essentially just used those weekly emails to put together my content for the first 2 weeks, which I dropped one episode per day. And that was all about, goal setting, progress tracking, basic health markers, objective tracking, subjective tracking, accountability, power of habit, creating consistency.
What's your process behind that? Are you creating a schedule like that's well thought out? Like, okay, for the next 10 days and then prioritizing that. And from there, how do you kickstart into a specific podcast? Are you doing research, or is it more creative on the flow? Like what goes behind that?
I don't know which question to answer there. So yes, I've got a structure. Like, I've got probably 120 odd podcasts out at the moment, episodes. And I always say, like, if people are listening for the first time, I always recommend they go back and listen from the start, because if I'm interviewing you, for example, and I'm asking you questions about, discipline, sleep, nutrition, et cetera, then I'm always going to tie it back to the fundamental principles that I discuss in the first probably 30 episodes. Right. And then once people have that information and those foundations, then we start layering upon that. And then we, at the end of the day, like, we need to look at the principles and then how to adjust those principles, use different methods, use different tactics to tweak those tools that we're using that's still going to allow us to abide by those principles to get us moving in the right direction.
And where did this structure come from that you kind of apply to everything in your life? Where does that stem from?
I'd definitely have to say the Army. Yeah, my six years in the Army. I'm quite disciplined. I'm quite structured because look, man, here's the thing. When you are aware of your own mortality, it makes you want to use your time wisely. So I'd written my will 3 times by the time I was 25, and there was times in Afghanistan where I was like, this could be my last patrol. I know we're going to a dangerous area. I know last time we were there, our interpreter was killed, or our mate lost his leg, or someone was shot, or whatever it might be. So, you know, when you've faced your own mortality and you've considered that, hey, this life is not finite, then, you know, it makes you, in my opinion, and in my mind, it makes me, you know, really relish the time that I do have, and it makes me want to squeeze the most out of every day. So that's where my structure, that's where my discipline came from. Now, I'm not structured, I'm not disciplined all the time, but, you know, I am quite disciplined with...
you do have some flexibility to it as well.
Of course.
Yeah.
Discipline's freedom, man.
Yeah.
Like, if I'm disciplined the majority of the time, but then I get sick or something happens and, you know, I need to be a little bit flexible, then I can be, because I'm working on the things that I want to work on each and every day, right? And if I stay ahead of where I need to be, then I'm being proactive and I'm on the front foot rather than being reactive, right? So if I'm ahead of where I need to be, for the most part, day in, day out, week in, week out, month in, month out, then, you know, that allows me the flexibility to then do whatever I want.
Would you say the war is won before it is fought? In that sense, meaning structure planning before you execute, not applying it to war, but applying it to life in general.
Say that again. I think that's an interesting...
The war is won before... It's from Sun Tzu. The war is won before it is fought, which basically means before you go to battle, whether it's business or whatever, you've had some planning, some structure, and then you execute.
Yeah. You definitely need to have a plan. But in saying that, it's not enough to just have a plan. You also need to put some action steps in place as well.
Now, one of your quotes I thought was quite interesting. You said, people in life who make easy decisions live a hard life, and people in life who make hard decisions live an easy life. Could you elaborate on that?
Yeah. This is a conversation that I have quite regularly. At the end of the day, I think everyone has a reference point, right? Like, if I said to you, and this is a legitimate question, you don't have to answer if you don't want to, but, you know, what's the most devastating thing that's ever happened to you in your life? You know, and then if I say, you know, how devastating was that on a scale of 1 to 10? And you might say, whatever, it's a 10, right? But then in my mind, that thing might be a lower on the scale. It's a different reference point. And then on the flip side, if I said, what's the most incredible thing that you've ever achieved or ever done or that's ever happened to you in your life on a scale of 1 to 10, right? And you say, blah. All right, on a scale of 1 to 10, blah. Right, so I've got a different reference point. The example that I like to use is my ex-girlfriend would always get frustrated with me because we'd be a week out from going on, you know, this 3-month holiday, and she was like, "Why aren't you showing any emotions?" I'm like, I'm excited, I'm looking forward to it, but I've also got the next week to square away everything so that I can actually go on this holiday and make the most of it, be in the moment, be present in the moment, before I get excited about it and forget these things that I need to do here to tie up my loose ends. And it took me a couple of years to register this and figure out a way to communicate it. And that's how I end up communicating it. And I was like, what's the most exciting thing you've ever done in your life? And she's like, skydiving. Scale of 1 to 10, 9 to 10. All right, well, for me, that's a 5 or a 6. What's the most exhilarating thing you've ever done in your life? And I'm like, being in a firefight. You know, I'm never going to be able to recreate that, but that's my reference point. So, you know, I think it's important to understand that your past, your experiences, your everything in life has shaped who you are, and it's given you those reference points, right? So someone who's had a really difficult life, who has faced a lot of adversity growing up and overcome those adversities and continued moving in the right direction, continued, you know, building their character into the person they want to be, you know, that person is typically going to be at an advantage because they've overcome so much and they've faced these adversities before. So they're a little bit more capable of dealing with adversities when they do come up. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No.
Were we on the right track?
Yeah, we were on the right track, and we were talking about people in life that make the hard decision, live this easy life, and yeah, that makes sense. And I think you're kind of connecting that also to be socially aware of when you're dealing with people outside of your world, because not everybody comes from the same mold. Yep. And that can be difficult. I think even for myself, it could be something as simple as driving on the road of Thailand. And why is this guy driving, like, one guy's driving 20 kilometers and the other guy's going 100? Well, they're two different people. So yeah, it's quite interesting. And I think, I'm assuming a lot of this education, this school of thought has come from your NLP as well, to kind of train you and to be able to process that certain information in this way.
Yeah. Again, I think it's all like life experiences that has taught me what I know now. And, I'm always looking to grow, looking to, personal and professional development. So it's it's high on my list of priorities. So, I'm always trying to learn. Someone asked me the other day, actually, I can't remember where I was having this conversation. But it's basically like, who are the people you look to for inspiration in this area, in this area, in this area, in this area. And the answer I gave was, I look at the people around me, because we tend to look at someone who is successful in one area, and we tend to think that they're successful in all areas, where that's typically not the case. If someone's successful in one area, then they're typically going to be investing a lot of time, energy, and effort into that area, whereas they might not be as well rounded in other areas. Or, the more you invest in one area of your life, then you're going to have to make sacrifices in other areas of your life. So
for yourself, both personally and professionally, you're looking at multiple mentors on different levels to connect with, instead of just focusing on, let's say, a singularity.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I like the Bruce Lee philosophy of, learn from everyone, take what's useful, discard what is not, put your own spin on it. So again, I look at, of course there's going to be people I look at in different spaces that I'm going to learn from. I'm going to consume their content, read their books, listen to their podcasts, etc., etc. But what I'm looking for there is lessons and principles. And then I look at people in my life that are actioning, those steps and living by those principles. Well, I think that the hardest part, and I think even for me personally, and I'm sure it applies to a lot of people, is it's very easy to learn, understand, and absorb a principle or a fundamental. And you can do that any time of the day. Go watch a YouTube video, read a document, or read an article, whatever. It's very difficult to execute it and make it a habit. Why is that? Is there a secret sauce behind all, like, is there an answer to that? Because you could apply that to yourself. Today, I'm going to wake up at 6 every day and I'm going to run. You'll do it for 2 days, but trust me, by Wednesday, you give up. Yeah. I think more like the question is like, and I'm not, maybe it's from your training and your background. And I'm sure you see it a lot, especially people probably coming to Tiger. They come for 10 days, and I guarantee you a lot of them drop off after a few. Is there a way to overcome, or is there something that we can put into practice to stay focused on those habits you're trying to build? Yeah, make sure that they align with your values. Because if you're... Here's the thing, man, like, time is our most precious commodity. It's the one thing that we don't get back, right? So if I'm decide that I'm going to work towards whatever, a specific goal, but it doesn't actually line up with my values, then my why for why I'm going to get out of bed, why I'm going to put processes in place on a daily basis to move me in the right direction. Like if that doesn't align with my values, then my why is not strong enough and I'm just going to fall off. Right, so I think that's the first thing is expectations. People set the wrong expectations because they're not asking themselves the right questions. And then the next thing I think is their commitment. people typically set too high expectations and set their commitment levels too low. Again, is that because they're not asking the right questions and what they're working towards doesn't necessarily align with their goals?
Would you agree that also, I mean, a big part of that is discipline, and at the end of the day, it's just your inner bitch being a little inner bitch, and it's very easy to say, I'm going to eat healthy for the whole week. And then for me, this whole week I'll eat healthy, and yesterday I had a fried rice and I fell off. But that was just me being a bitch, for sure. I could have easily made dinner, but then I'm at the beach, I have a beer, then I had some fried rice, and now I'm not making dinner. So, I mean,
yeah, but
that's the discipline side.
Yeah, but that ties into the values. So if I say to you, like, why are you deciding to eat clean this week?
Well, it's most likely because I haven't eaten clean for a week or two, and you just, you start to feel inflamed and bloated, and you just, because everything is produced in your gut, and then your gut creates, your serotonin, which can throw you into depression very quickly just from eating shit for 1 week. So I can feel that, and I know when that creeps up. It doesn't mean I'm going to jump off the roof, but I mean, you just feel like shit, and you're like, okay, next week I got to eat clean. So that's the reason why I'm doing it. But after cooking, it's so much easier just to go to the beach, have a Thai, have a beer, relax. I mean,
but that's the balance, man. Like, did you still achieve your goal of eating clean the majority of the time and
90%.
and improving your gut health, which then improves, your endocrine system and thoughts, mood, attitude, etc.? You still achieved that whilst you had a cheat meal? You did.
Yeah. It's true. Man. It's true. But then I find that sometimes those cheat meals can spiral.
Yeah, of course. Yeah. Because it becomes a habit, and this, people justify to themselves. So I think understanding what your values are, why you're doing something, but then also being flexible with it. Yes, it's okay to be disciplined, okay, but here's the thing, you had this negative association with, you just said, like, I fell off.
Yeah.
You think about the words that you're using right there, like that's part of NLP, how you're speaking to yourself, right? You've just created an association with, basically, I failed. I've failed my diet this week, so I may as well have a beer. I may as well stay up a little bit later. I may as well, today's done, so fuck it, I'll do whatever. And then that happens on Friday. Oh, well, fuck it, the weekend. I'll do whatever I want on the weekend. I'll start on Monday.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So you justify it, man. Whereas if you said to me, hey, dude, like, this is my value, I know that my gut health has been a little bit off. It's affecting my sleep. It's affecting my hormones, affecting my performance, my energy, my productivity, etc., etc. All right, cool. What are you going to do? What's your action step? I'm going to eat cleaner next week. What does that mean? And then you go, I'm going to eat 80% good food and use 20% flexibility. All right, what does that mean? Okay, my 80% good food, I'm going to have 4 good meals that are, full of protein, good fats, fiber, a little bit of carbohydrates around training, minimally processed, etc., etc. Okay, I'm going to do that 4 meals in a row, and then I'm going to choose something a little bit less nutrient dense. And are you still achieving that goal at the end of the week? Yes.
Yeah, you try your best. You try to do the 80-20. And what about for yourself? You're human. You fall off the rails sometimes and maybe have a 7-Eleven meltdown, or
of course.
What's your like, or maybe just explain a story of when you, I don't want to say fall off as too negative, but what has happened and how did you kind of rebound and get back into your structure and your habits?
So last weekend, we're recording this Thursday, was it 30?
Today's Thursday, yeah.
Thursday, 1st of July.
Yep.
So over this last weekend, I played rugby against my teammates, and we split our team up into 2 teams and played a 7s match. And it was also one of my mates' farewells. So, I went and had some drinks with the boys afterwards and had a big night and didn't get home till 7:30 in the morning.
There you go.
So, but I planned for that. I knew that my mate was leaving. I knew that I was playing rugby. I knew that I hadn't been drinking. I'd been doing the right thing, the right thing in quotation marks. I'd been looking after myself for the last month. So I was going into that knowing that, hey, I'm going to have a little bit of a blowout. I'm going to enjoy this time. Again, because I'm disciplined the majority of the time, that gives me the flexibility to do that. Now, if that becomes a weekly thing, then that becomes a problem, right? So we want to make our good habits the path of least resistance, right? So when we condition ourselves to do these things, and again, ties back into making sure that what you're doing is aligning with your values, okay, then setting small goals, small tasks every day that you need to tick off the list. If you can get up in the morning and, you know, you've written your schedule out the day before and you start the day by getting out of bed when your alarm goes off and then making your bed and then opening the blinds, getting some sunshine in your eyes, getting outside, getting some fresh air, doing 5 minutes of meditation, whatever it might be, like, man, that's the first 5 minutes of my day. And I've just won. I've won. And if I can stack win upon win upon win on a daily basis, guess what? I just won the fucking day. I do that over a week, I've won the week. I do that over a month, there's the month, there's the year.
What happens, and I was talking to Phil about that last week as well, it's just saying these, ticking off these 1% can add up after over a year to, you know, 56, what I think he said like 38%, 34%.
37.
There it is. I was in there. I was close. But for you, when you have those big nights, and I think this is important for all of our 8 listeners.
Hi guys.
I think this is important that when you have those big nights and you know they're coming, do you rebound the next day, or is that kind of a write-off day and you're planning for the day after?
Again, that'll depend how I feel. Yeah, like typically if I know something's coming up, for example, like if someone has a wedding coming up and they're dieting and they're, you know, on the right track, then what I teach my clients is prepare for that, right? Like, you know that you're going to overconsume on whatever, a Saturday night. Let's say, you know, you're eating whatever, 2,000 calories a day. So leading into that Saturday, you know you're going to have a blowout. You don't know exactly what your numbers are, but, you know, start planning for it. Couple days out, maybe, you know, Tuesday, maybe you drop down to 1,800 calories, 1,600 calories leading into that Saturday. You know, I'm not saying like just count calories. Also, when you're going into that, you need to make sure that the foods you're eating are very nutrient dense. So you're preparing your body for, you know, the onslaught essentially of alcohol, toxins, shitty processed foods, whatever it might be, poor sleep patterns, etc. You know that your body is going to be under stress, right? And you know, you understand stress. I'm sure we'll get into the mushrooms and the stuff that you guys are doing, but you know you're going to be putting your body under stress. So I'm going to be making sure that I minimize that stress leading up to that by maybe reducing my training load a little bit more, maybe, you know, drinking plenty more water, reducing my calories a little bit, making sure that I'm eating good, wholesome, real, colorful, natural foods.
And how calculated are you in that in terms of measuring your macros, counting calories? Are you watching your sleep? Are you using devices? How in tune are you into, like, because now we have all these devices and technology that you can calculate that, you can weigh your food. Are you, how dialed in are you?
I'm dialed in with certain things, but then I'm not dialed in with other things. And what I mean by dialed in is like, or not dialed in is not tracking. Like, I don't track my food.
Okay.
Because I don't need to. I can look at a plate of food because I've done it before.
Yes.
I can look at a plate of food and say, there's this much energy on that. These are my macronutrient ratios. These are the micronutrients.
But you did do that before.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, same,
of course.
Same here. I did that maybe 3 years ago, and I'm kind of at that level of where I can get it. And then you kind of cheat because you throw sauce in there and you're like, yeah, that's what it is.
Yeah, but that's the thing, man. Yeah. It's like, it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. And it's not going to be, right? Like, I think the food industry allows like 30% sway, like up or down with calories and, you know, their food label and things like that. So, again, like, I don't need to track my food because I've done it before and I've got a good understanding of, you know, what fuels food provides for me. But that's a positive association I've created with food, right? So in terms of data, I do track I'm wearing a Fitbit, so I do track, I track every morning I track my blood pressure.
Okay.
I track my waking heart rate, and I track my heart rate variability. And then each day, and then I'll track my sleep.
I track my sleep. I look at my sleep. And that helps determine how hard you'll train that day.
Exactly. Yeah. So this data, there's a difference between data, information, knowledge, and wisdom. Okay. Data is someone just looking at their app and they see a number. Okay. But they don't know what that number means. Still data, right? Information is, what does that number on the screen mean? And then the knowledge is, all right, well, I see the number on the screen for sleep, for example, is down. That means that, hey, I probably didn't sleep that well that night. And maybe I ate something before bed that was inflammatory, that affected my sleep. Or, maybe I was a little bit anxious because something's going on in my life, blah, blah, blah. Okay, but then the wisdom is taking that information and planning ahead. So if I wake up in the morning and my heart rate variability is down, do you want me to explain that, by the way? Yeah,
for sure.
Okay. So heart rate variability, I'll go back to blood pressure, waking heart rate variability. So this data can give us information on the state of our organism, right? How much stress it's under at the moment, how well it's operating essentially. Like, is it close to homeostasis where everything is balanced, everything's operating normally? So the heart rate variability, if I take that, it gives me a snapshot into my autonomic nervous system. So when people look at heart rate.
Yeah, I listened to this podcast you did, I think.
Yeah. So
yesterday I was listening.
Okay. Yeah. So the heart rate is, if it's 60 beats per minute, then it's not boom, 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 like a metronome. What's happening if your heart rate's 60 beats per minute, the first heart contraction that pumps blood might be 870 milliseconds, and the next one might be 1240 milliseconds, and the next one's 976 milliseconds, next one's 1148 milliseconds, whatever it is. Okay, so that's high variability between the heart contractions. That's a good thing. That means that my body's taking all this information from the environment and it's adjusting, the systems within my body to deal with this input. So high heart rate variability, it's a good thing. It means your body's pretty well at homeostasis and your ability to deal with stress is heightened. So that means that, hey, if I wake up, I've had good sleep, my heart rate variability is good, my readiness score is good, then I'm going to get after my training today.
And you can track that I never saw, I've only tracked the sleep. I haven't tracked the heart rate variability. That's in the app itself. Are you using I'm using the Fitbit app. Or are you using a different app?
No, so I use a chest strap because the technology used in the watches or the wearables compared to a chest strap is different. And these just aren't as accurate. Yeah. So, I use a chest strap, a heart rate monitor to test that along with my waking heart rate. So, as I said, like if my heart rate variability is down, then I know that, hey, maybe I'm still going to train today, but I know that my body's under stress essentially. So I'm going to adjust my training. Maybe I'll do a little bit of extra meditation in the morning. Maybe I still train, but instead of doing a heavy hard session, maybe I'll do some mobility, some soft tissue work, maybe a little bit of, low intensity steady state work, so that I'm still getting some movement in, but I'm not adding more stress on top of an already stressed organism. I'm doing things that's going to drive the parasympathetic state, rest and digest, and allow me to rest, recover, recuperate, and get back to homeostasis. Maybe, turn my phone off a little bit earlier, turn my lights down a little bit earlier, maybe eat a little bit earlier and go to bed a little bit earlier, right? And I'm choosing different tasks throughout my day. Luckily, I, basically work for myself. Obviously, I have my gig at Tiger, but then I've got my own stuff going on. So then I'll start adjusting my work tasks to suit my energy levels, to suit, that data that's basically giving me the information in the morning to then be able to put some action steps in place throughout the day to then balance everything out.
And are you applying this, like the educational aspect at Tiger, or is this more like your one-on-one mentor and coaching?
Yeah, so Okay, going back to what we said earlier, where I was like, watch this space. This is stuff that I've been doing with a handful of fighters in the past, particularly Petr Yan.
Yep.
So I've basically been testing these systems on guys like that and other professional fighters. And this is something that I'm going to be implementing into Tiger to give people the education.
Are they accepting it, or are they hesitant? Is it easy to get them on board? Because again, it's a whole other dimension to your life when you introduce this tracking. I mean, you have to be very disciplined. You could do it for, again, a couple days, but by the third day, you could just give up. Did you find that these fighters or the people that you're educating with this new information, that they're taking it on quite easily, or are they more hesitant?
Yeah, great question. Everyone's different. At the end of the day, like, it's my job as a coach to find a way to effectively communicate this stuff. So every single person's going to be different. And man, I'll tell you, like, what was a game changer for someone like Petr Yan, like when he was training when he was in fight camp before he fought Jose Aldo for the UFC bantamweight championship. Like, you know, he was training through quarantine with a small select number of people, myself included. Once the gym reopened again, you know, I was already taking his blood pressure, his HRV before each training session. And the cool thing was, I remember one time in particular, he'd been training really hard for like 4 or 5 weeks. We'd gotten back into the gym. We'd only been back in the gym for like 2 weeks or something. And I could see his HRV was trending down. And I trained him on Thursday, and I was like, next week, he speaks Russian.
Yeah.
I speak English. So, you know, it's difficult to communicate at times. So I had to really slow it down. I was like, next week.
Like a deload week.
I was like, next week, deload.
Yeah.
Yep. No strength and conditioning, no MMA. You choose one session per day. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, hard. Tuesday, Thursday, recover, massage, sauna, ice bath, blah, 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 blah.
But they're fighters. They're not going to listen to that.
Dude, I saw him run a big Buddha on the weekend, right? But then come Monday, Tuesday, the next week, he was fucked, mate. He was in bed.
Right? Because your immune system's jeopardized.
Exactly. Yeah. That's exactly right. So he'd pushed so hard into a sympathetic state, right? Like, stress is important. We need stress for survival, right? But we need to optimize stress. We don't need to reduce it. Sometimes you need to reduce it, but you know, we don't need to completely cut it out. Like, it's essential for adaptation, but we need to optimize it. And he'd pushed so far into a sympathetic state and I could see that with his data because it was telling me. And I was also connecting that data with how he was performing, how he was moving. You know, I go through some balance-based work, stability-based work, single leg, single arm work, taking the joints through multiple positions, etc. And, you know, that the state of his nervous system when it's under stress, it's like movement's not a priority for me. You know, I need to recover. So it's going to start shutting different things down, starting to prioritize these different systems. So I could tell, man, it's like his balance is normally awesome. You know, coordination, timing, accuracy is normally awesome. And then, you know, I'm going through these drills, these assessments, and I can see these all over the place. But I've also just taken his data and seen that his heart rate variability is trending down. I can see he's under massive stress.
The biggest, the most difficult piece of the puzzle is expressing this data to the fighters, but actually getting them not to train. Maybe this is off the top of my head, but I think that involves a conversation with the wife and saying, "Hey,
dude,
don't let him out."
That was the point that I was getting to, right? It's like, you know, I'd been telling him this information for, you know, months leading up to it. And, you know, he ignored me. And I said to him, I was like, if you train next week, train hard, you'll get sick. He got sick and he comes back the next week, man. He goes, "Coach, I'm sorry, I listened to you now." Yeah, he had to make that mistake.
Yeah, I guess so.
To realize that, hey, there's something to this.
Well, they don't think, you know, you're able to see you're a fortune teller.
Yeah.
I mean, they're like, how would you know I'm getting sick, going to get sick just based on data? But no, that's interesting because I think that's happened with other UFC fighters like Hamza Chimaev as well. He kept training when he had COVID and he just couldn't get better. Well, because he's sick. The immune system's jeopardized.
Yeah.
Do you see this are you working with other fighters as well that maybe you're allowed to speak about at Tiger Muay Thai for strength and conditioning?
Yeah, so I've been working with a number of sponsored fighters who I've got an affiliation with their manager. over the last, well, obviously not last couple of months, but probably the last 8 months prior to that. Just, again, building out systems, testing these systems, and just seeing how it all carries over to, you know, their craft. And the results are there, man. The results are there. So, you know, we've got to keep refining the systems, get more people on board, create buy-in for the fighters. And again, like, we're going through a little bit of a reshuffle at Tiger at the moment. We've just had a couple of coaches leave. We've got a number of other guys that have just started, and other guys that we're looking at to come in and to be a part of the team. And, you know, there's been, again, like, I come from a team-based background. You know, I'm part of a big family. I've got 5 younger brothers and sisters. I was in the military. I always worked with teams. You know, my first section in Iraq was like 10 people. I went to East Timor. I had 5-6 people in a patrol, and then 4 people as part of a sniper team in Afghanistan. Played rugby my entire life. So, you know, taking these principles from these team-based environments and putting them into, you know, an individual sport like, you know, MMA, Muay Thai, etc. Where, here's the thing, man, like, if you look at
UFC, or sorry, not the UFC, MMA, it is a team sport. Just people don't understand. There's a team behind them.
100%.
Right.
And that's the thing, like, right now or in the last couple of years that I've been there, you know, it's something that I've picked up on that could definitely be improved. And that's basically what I'm looking to build out at Tiger now. So, the goal is to get the right people on board, not just the right people in terms of coaches, but also the fighters that are going to buy into the system as well. Because, man, like, let's be honest, there can definitely be a lot of ego in the fight game.
Okay.
And I mean, that's important, man. Like, if you're going to get into a fucking cage and, you know, try and tear someone's head off, then
you need that ego. You need the confidence as well. Yeah. Are you, and maybe a quick little plug here, are you applying this Swiss 8 approach to your fighters as well? Or is this applied to all aspects of your training? These principles.
Yeah, this applies to all aspects of training. So, Swiss 8's a proactive mental health program that was initially designed by veterans, for veterans initially, but then obviously, you know, COVID happened and everyone's stuck at home. And look, man, here's the thing, you know, as a veteran, we've gone through this before where, you know, you get out of the army and you lose your identity. You have your routine. Like, when you're in the army, man, it's like you rock up, you be where you're supposed to be, when you're supposed to be there, with the right kit, and you're good to go. Everything else is like taken care of. You have lunch at the same time, you have breakfast at times, blah, 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 blah. Like, everything is so structured and so regimented.
Come home and it's just...
Yeah. So,
it's free,
you know, I went through this as well. Once I got out of the army, I kind of lost my way a little bit. And to be honest, man, like, I needed that time, right? I just got back from Afghanistan, done 6 years full time. I'd missed, you know, birthdays, weddings, funerals, blah, blah, blah. So I needed that time to kind of unwind and just relax a little bit, let my hair down and be a little bit undisciplined and fucking sleep in and, you know, skip training sessions and all that sort of stuff. But then after probably 6, 8, 9 months, I realized that I was not getting depressed. I wouldn't say that, but, you know, I just wasn't my typical self. And I could feel my mental health and my physical health, like, just slightly declining. And I was like, all right, what's going on here? So yeah, I started again doing those things that had made me such a good soldier, getting up at the same time, making my bed, shaving every day, training, blah, 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 and just, you know, having a little bit of structure in my life. And so Swiss 8 was initially designed by a couple of mates who had gone through the same process and, you know, fell into a little bit of depression, and I guess the wheels kind of fell off and they'd lost their way. They didn't really know what they're doing. And the catalyst for them creating an app was one of the boys took his own life, which has unfortunately occurred way too often in the last few years. So the boys like, right, initially they want to get a retreat where they could send the boys and like teach them these life skills to reintegrate them back into society using all these...
trying to bring structured to an unstructured environment. Yeah,
exactly. So the boys created an app and they push that out to the wider community last year as people went into lockdown, to give them some structure, give them some tools to be able to deal with, you know, losing their jobs, losing, you know, people in their lives, losing their some people their entire life, man, like everything they'd built.
PTSD, it stems from lack of structure. Like I think this is it's a term that's loosely thrown around in today's world. We understand PTSD, we know what it stands for, but unless you were actually you went through it, it's very difficult for someone like myself or anyone else to picture it and really understand what is PTSD. What is that feeling of? Because it must be beyond depression. It's another level. Could you explain a little bit of what is PTSD exactly?
So first of all, I'm not clinically qualified to speak about this, and I haven't suffered from PTSD either. So, I do have mates that have suffered from PTSD, do suffer from PTSD, but I definitely think there's something to. I don't know, man. It's a complex subject, right? Like,
and I think it goes back to for everybody, it's different as well.
Yeah, I think it's a snowball, right? I think, you know, something happens in your life, you create an association with it, you tell that story, and then each time something happens in your life that, you know, you make these connections with that event that occurred, then that plays over in your head again, and again, like I honestly think it ties in with stress.
Okay.
Right? Like if you have like a soldier who comes back from Afghanistan, for example, they're in this heightened state all the time, right? Like they're constantly pushing out cortisol and adrenaline, and their brain essentially thinks they're under threat.
This doesn't drop down after you come back. You're constantly at this state of mind, this level.
Yeah. And I think that's where the issues start coming in. It's one, you know, whatever's occurred overseas. I think it goes back before that as well, to be honest. I think, you know, like even going overseas, I remember probably about 2 or 3 months before I went to Afghanistan for 9 months, I was with my sniper team and we're conducting like a very realistic first aid, not a course, but like a week-long training. Yep. That was quite realistic, and like we had pigs there that we were cutting open, and we had guys that had lost limbs that were, you know, playing casualties and things like that. So we were on that training program, and we all got called in, and we were told that a couple of boys had been killed in Afghanistan that morning with their explosive detection dog. And you know, this was a couple months before we were going over there, and I just remember sitting down with my sniper team and just like having an open conversation with them and saying, hey, like, we're going to make sure that we are doing everything we can to put ourselves in a good position. We're going to make sure that we take this fucking training as serious as possible and challenge ourselves, but not only challenge ourselves, make sure that we're like winning, make sure that we're achieving these things, and then we're constantly reviewing and adjusting and, you know, tweaking our standard operating procedures so that we could essentially go to Afghanistan with, you know, the tools required to be able to perform our job. And, you know, that was a conversation that we had, was like, maybe we're not all going to come back alive. And again, this goes back to what we spoke about right at the start about
I think
understanding our own mortality.
That's a good segue into that. And if you want to discuss this, I thought it was quite interesting. I listened to it today. October 13th.
Very prominent date in my life.
I listened to your podcast on that. I thought it was very interesting. You were very articulate the way you explained it. And I think it's a perspective from someone that's been in that position, that the story was very emotional, intriguing, and even for myself that hasn't done something like that, able to connect to. Would you mind sharing that story? It's up to you, though.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and this will kind of tie back into the Swiss 8 stuff that we're talking about as well. So October 13th, I'd been in Afghanistan for about 2 weeks. We had done a number of partner patrols with the outgoing team. This was the first patrol that we were doing once they'd flown out. So it was our first standalone patrol. And our job was our base's job was to train the Afghan National Army so that essentially they could take over security of their own country once we left. So we went out on patrols with my 4-man sniper team. We were working with about 30-ish other Australians and about 30 to 40 Afghani counterparts. And we'd had intelligence that there was like 20 Taliban in the area who'd just come in from Pakistan. Well, the first probably hour of the patrol, we came face to face with them out the front of a mosque. But if
I just jump in on that quick, the Taliban coming from Pakistan into Afghanistan, are they coming in to try to take over as you leave? Is that their intention?
Yeah, so the team that was there before us had done a really good job, and they'd like killed and captured a number of key leaders in the area. So they'd lost a lot of ground. They'd lost a lot of freedom of movement. Mm-hmm. So, you know, they knew that they would have a new team flying in soon, and the old team that done so much damage was leaving, right? So they knew that was occurring, and then they ensured they had people on the ground to take advantage of that. So, yeah, we ended up coming face to face with these guys coming out of a mosque first thing that morning on patrol, and you know, they know the rules, man. They know our rules of engagement, and as long as they didn't have anything on them, like we were just like seriously looking in their face going, these motherfuckers. Like we know why they're here. They're here to fucking kill us.
And you can't just arrest them at that point, even if they have nothing on them.
Exactly. So we were going through the process of, you know, scanning their eyes, fingerprint scans, et cetera, like gathering their data. But, you know, dude, like they don't carry driver's license like we do. They don't have their wallet on them, you know, so they've got their AK-47 stashed around the corner. So we're like, all right, we know why these guys are here. Like, we know they're here. We've got the intelligence, and now we've just seen them, so it's confirmed. So anyway, went on a patrol. The engineers were searching a specific area. They had a security section, were setting up a cordon around that area, and also, like, you know, mentoring the Afghani counterparts. My sniper team were conducting a satellite patrol where we were kind of moving in and out of buildings through the fields and trying to interdict anyone that was laying IEDs, ambushes and things like that. So anyway, we ended up like trying to interdict a couple of people and ended up missing them because we were a couple of 100 meters away by the time we got there, you know, moving, you know, quite stealthily through the area. They disappeared. Mm-hmm. And then we got word over the radio that the search had basically been finished, and it was our role to then move into a location, find an exit point to get out of the green zone back into the desert, because there's these aqueducts.
What is the green zone for anyone that doesn't understand that?
Yeah, good question. So the green zone, it's not a safe area. The green zone is literally where the trees are, because in the valleys, you've got these big mountains on either side, and then in the valley, it's where the river runs. And then obviously where the river runs, that's where the greenage is, right? So then they have these aqueducts where they basically like dig these channels to channel the water from the river into their fields. You know, there's a heap of marijuana growing and poppies and things like that. So some of these aqueducts were massive, man, like 2 meters wide, 2 meters deep. And, you know, there was only certain footbridges where you could cross over. So that's obviously where, you know, Taliban would lay IEDs and target us as we were going through. And they're trying to essentially channel us into these areas. So anyway, word came over the radio, snipers, go and do your thing, find a position for us to break out. So we started moving in that direction. We got to a certain point and we just saw atmospherics deteriorate, you know, like just everyone just disappeared, man. And then there's like
the local people living there.
All the locals just disappeared. They saw us and they're like, oh shit, and they got the fuck out of there. So we're like, oh, there's something bad's about to happen.
And could you paint the picture of where you're at? This is a small city, because in my mind it's kind of looking like maybe 50 houses in the desert, or what is the size of this city? What's the population? What's going on there?
I remember something like The Lone Survivor, you know, that movie. It's something like that.
Yep. So
that's what I picture.
Yeah, the green zone is like, it's a long like belt that follows the river, right? So wherever there's water, like that's where the green zone is. That's where people live. So it's not like it's not like a traditional city where you've got a CBD and then they build out from there.
Okay.
Like in the cities, that's where it is. But like in the valleys, it's like literally just people just live along the river. So
it's kind of sporadic down the river.
There's like specific areas and specific villages, but it's like one village leads into the next village, leads into the next village, leads into the next village. So, you know, there are areas where the green zone was only like a couple of 100 meters wide. So then there'd be, you know, whatever, 30, 40 koala complexes in there, you know, mud brick homes where the locals would live, and they'd have like their entire family in there. And then there'd be one here, and then be another one, you know, 150 meters away, so on and so forth. But then other areas like the green zone was 3 kilometers wide. Wow. So yeah, it was quite complex terrain. So yeah, we got to this particular area, and atmospheric started deteriorating. Guys were coming out and like literally like herding their goats, herding their sheeps back into the houses, like mums calling their kids over and shit like that. And we're like, all right, this is not looking good. Like, let's get the fuck out of here. And as we like dropped back into some cover, just observe what was going on a little bit, and then we're about to start moving off, we saw this one dude like walking down the footpad, which is basically, you know, there was some cars and stuff there, but people walked, and they had these like little mopeds that they'd drive around on, and the footpad was like literally basically the main road of that village, which was a dirt track, right? We saw one dude walking down there, and we're like, oh, what's this dude doing? He was the only person in the area, and he hadn't seen us at the time, so we stayed in a little bit of cover, let him come a little bit closer. Once he got close enough, I came out with my rifle in my shoulder, pointed at him, and I was like, you know, started speaking to him in Pashtun, and, you know, told him stop, told him come over. As soon as he saw me, he went to turn and run off, so kind of sprung him. I already had one in the chamber, but I just cocked it, let him know that, you know, I've got one in the spout ready to roll. And then he kind of like started walking over. By this stage, he was about 100 meters away. He started walking along the footpad. He gets to a certain point, he wouldn't come any closer. By this stage, I'm probably about 40 meters away from him. So I'm like, Tamps, cover me. I'm going to head over. You know, I'm carrying my first aid kit, my X-spray kit, which basically tells us if they've had any explosives on them, if they've been firing weapons and things like that. So I basically walked over, slung my weapon. My mate was covering me. I went and X-sprayed him. And then my team leader was probably about 10 meters behind me. And he like turns to this dude and goes, "Oi, Pakistani, Talib." And the dude goes, "Oh," and went like this and turned, man. And as soon as he turned, boom, it just lit up. Like it was fucking there was just rounds kicking up all around us. So I hit the deck, pulled that dude down, packed everything I could, like turned, started firing, and there was a wall about 10 meters away. So sprinted over there, jumped over the wall, turned around, tried to identify where the firing points were. I was carrying an assault rifle, but also had a grenade launcher attachment. Because I couldn't see exactly where the firing points were, I was like, all right, I think that's where the firing point was. Instead of a direct fire weapon, I was like, I'm just going to start lobbing some high explosive grenades over there. At this point,
is it just, it's too dusty, you cannot see anything because so much shit's going off and it's difficult to see where to shoot? Or
there was obviously like adrenaline, there was dust kicking up. Yeah. We could still see what was going on, but there's obviously still a little bit of fog of war. We're going like, what the fuck's going on here? Like, you know, are we in a complex ambush where they've laid an IED that hasn't gone off, which actually happened to be the case. But yeah, anyway, jumped over this wall and this dude was like crawling. So I grabbed him, picked him up, dragged him over the wall. I'm still sitting there firing, throwing some high explosive grenades down. I look over and my mate, Seamus, the team leader's on his ass, like firing single-handedly, dragging his tourniquet out. So we punched down a heap of rounds, got their heads down, got the initiative, and then my mate Rob went over, put his tourniquet on. I ran over, dragged him into cover, and then started patching Seamus up and, you know, giving him IV fluids and morphine and all that sort of shit. By that stage, the medic had gotten there, so he took over the first aid duties, and the other boys had like rolled through and continued the fight with the Taliban chasing them up. And yeah, from there we put Seamus on a helicopter and then ended up going up on top of some high ground so that we could observe what was going on, call in fire, provide battlefield commentary, provide direct fire if needed, and support. And about 30 minutes of sitting in location on top of this hill, Rob like sweeps away a little bit of dirt and he looks at us with his eyes wide and he's like, "Fuck, boys." I'm like, "What's up, man?" He goes, "We're sitting on top of an IED." And luckily it didn't go off.
What is an IED?
improvised explosive device.
Is that built? Is it kind of like a landmine in some sort of sense, or?
Yeah, basically. So, you know, the Taliban aren't going to try and fight us like front on, because they're at much more of risk.
Yep.
Whereas if they can lay an IED, which basically use pressure plates, so they'll use, you know, telephones and things like that to make a call that would connect the circuit. And once that circuit was connected, then they'd have like pressure plates. So 2 pieces of wood taped together, kind of like with springs on either end, with metal on the inside. And as we step on top of it, it creates that connection. And then
when you step it up,
boom, yeah.
Okay. So at this point, you're on top of the IED.
We're sitting on top of an IED that
Jesus
didn't
Christ.
go off. So yeah, you know, could have potentially died twice that day. And yeah, man, that was a massive adrenaline dump. I remember getting back to base, man. I was probably out for like 6 to 8 hours, and I was fucked. I was like, oh, I need sleep. So, yeah, back out on patrol the next day, and burst a machine gun fire ripped up the ground between my mate and I, and I was like, fuck, this is gonna be a long trip.
My God, yeah, that's quite intense. And you said we would tie that all into Swiss 8 and probably applying those principles into this as well.
Yeah. So, as I said, a couple of like really difficult days there, and you know, we did our best to deal with those emotions, not knowing whether our team leader was going to live or die, knowing that, you know, we're 2 weeks into at that stage an 8-month deployment that ended up turning into 9 months, knowing that, you know, one of the guys that had put us through all of our training was no longer with us. We didn't have that leadership element anymore. So that led to, you know, all these what if scenarios. Been here for 2 weeks. All right, fuck, someone's already been shot. You know, almost been killed twice already, 3 times in 2 days. So, you know, that led to all these what if scenarios, which then affected my sleep, which then affected my ability to perform, do my job as a lead scout. I was the eyes and ears of the patrol. So, you know, I always thought that if I made a mistake and, you know, the bloke behind me copped around to the chest or stood on an IED, lost his life, lost a limb or whatever it might be, then that was going to be on my conscience for the rest of my life. So I hadn't been taught any of these tools to be able to manage my mind, and the only thing that I could do was like, I just started counting my breaths. Every night before I went to bed, I started counting my breaths. And over time, over a couple of weeks, you know, of just, again, practicing that as something I hadn't done before, hadn't really paid any attention to it, kind of thought of it as woo-woo. But once I started doing it, like, it allowed me to get to sleep. It allowed me to wake up and be well rested and then be able to perform that day knowing that...
You would consider this a form of meditation?
Well, I didn't know it at the time, but yes. Yeah, so, again, I didn't know it at the time, but the byproduct of that was, you know, it changed my mindset. When I started focusing on my breath, I was like, well, what if this happens tomorrow? We know we're going here. That's where Seamus got shot. That's where the IED was. That's where blah, 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 blah. And instead of focusing on those things that were outside of my control, I was just focusing on my breath. And that allowed me to then focus on the things that were within my control as a byproduct. All right, cool, we're going here. I can't control what's going to happen there, but I do know that once we cross that line, once we get past that koala complex, we know that that's where the bad dudes are. We know this person lives in this location. We know that they know we're coming each time. So, you know, what can I do to be proactive and make sure that I'm effective at my job? Not only effective at my job of, you know, being the eyes and ears of the patrol, but also like mitigating the risks and potentially getting the jump on someone who's setting something up for us to take them out before they had an opportunity to take us out or set something up. So yeah, and again, I'll tie that back in, like that breath work that allowed me to focus on what I could control. Then once I went back to Australia last year and did that yoga course, and again, one of my mates was running that course because he used yin-style yoga as an alternate therapy for PTSD, used it to deal with anxiety, depression, had taught a heap of other guys these tools to be able to manage their mind to deal with these things. So once I did that course last year, I told that story. It's like, has anyone gone through stress? Anyone blah, blah, blah. And I told that story and he was like, you've been meditating for years. You just didn't know it. So yeah, and like that's the whole concept of Swiss 8, right? Is like it's It's all about, you know, sleep, nutrition, time management, discipline, fitness, personal growth, mindfulness, minimalism. And it's about taking these tools, taking these principles, and then applying them into your day to day. And it's something I've been doing for many years, and that's why.
Whatever you do, whether it's studying, whether it's trying to learn a new skill set, whether it's strength and conditioning, you're applying these principles to everything you do in life.
Yeah, exactly. So it's about looking at these tools and then figuring out how can I tweak them, how can I adjust them to my day to allow me to be better at life, which is their motto, right? So it was already something that I'd been doing for years, but I've just been tweaking and adjusting over the years, refining to suit whatever's going on in my life as my values change, whether that's like a daily basis, a weekly basis, a monthly basis, a yearly basis, or whatever, and adjusting those tools to suit whatever was going on. So Adrian, the founder of Swiss 8, asked me to become an ambassador for them a couple of years ago because I'd already been using these tools. And, you know, something that I think is important for other veterans to see as well is like, you know, other guys have gone through tough times. They've fallen off the wagon, so to speak. You know, maybe the wheels have fallen off a little bit. They've got into, you know, a bad mindset, but then they've used these tools to be able to get out of them and then continue to excel in whatever path they choose in life. And
have they, from Swiss 8, is there any data behind it that is able to show the success rates from it?
Yeah, so there's some research going on at, I think it's Newcastle or University of Newcastle in Australia at the moment. Yep. So yeah, we're still waiting to see what the data says. But at the end of the day, that's why the app was created, because, you know, we've got all this anecdotal evidence where Adrian's, you know, talking to his mates and they're all getting together on Anzac Day or for weddings or bucks parties or whatever it is. And, you know, all it takes is one person to say, hey, you know what, like my mental health hasn't been great, man. Like I haven't been feeling great. And, you know, the shit going on in my life that I can't control and I don't know how to handle it. And then one person says that, and then that kind of starts conversation. And then someone else says that, and then someone else says that, and someone else says that. And then it's like, hey man, like when you feel like this, have you tried doing that?
Would you say that you have this structure in the Army, and then again you come back home and you're living in an unstructured world? Is Swiss 8 recreating that brotherhood?
Yeah. The app is all about giving people the tools to be proactive and looking ahead on, again, day-to-day basis, weekly basis, monthly basis, etc. But what they're also working on now is they've just finished up like the Fink Desert Race, where they get, you know, former soldiers to get together, and they've got guys that are riding the bikes, they've got mechanics, they've got guys that are, you know, doing the admin logistics, they've got guys that are cooking feeds and, you know, all that sort of stuff. So they're kind of like recreating that brotherhood and just teaching, you know, taking these skills that we've already learned, but just repurposing them into something else and creating that tribe again. Because I think that's something that's missing, man, is, you know, as I said, like I went from being in the army, being in Darwin, to then, you know, wanting to follow a girl into and chasing a relationship with a girl that, you know, I wanted to see where it would go, and I basically left my tribe behind, right? So that was a difficult process, and I'm 100% grateful for Lauren for, you know, her ability to, you know, impact me the way that she did through that process, because it was a very difficult process, and I was away from my friends, I was away from my family, you know. So I think that's an important component, is giving guys, again, these tools that they've already learned, but it's just repurposing them to suit whatever's going on in their life, and then giving them that sense of brotherhood and that purpose, man. I think purpose is such an important thing in
life in general.
In life, man, yeah. Because purpose brings achievement, and achievement brings fulfillment, right?
On a lighter note, you spent some time in Darwin. What does BUDJU mean?
You're pronouncing it wrong.
I know. I was gonna say it's either like BUDJU or BUDJU, but I'm like, I can't do the Aussie accent. I'm definitely going to pronounce it wrong, but what does it mean?
BUDJU.
There you go. See, I wouldn't even got it if you told me it.
It's man, it's a different it's a different slang up there.
Okay.
Yeah, I lived there for 10, 12 years on and off, and yeah, even I don't understand some of that.
In context, like when would someone use that? Put that into a sentence. Don't worry, I did some real deep research on you.
Fuck.
That's gonna throw you off.
So I don't know. I don't know how true this is. It could be complete bullshit, but I did hear that like when I was away with whatever, like one of the younger, like under 16s, under 17s rugby teams, like BUDJU meant like whale's vagina or something.
Okay.
Don't know if that's true.
All right.
But then it also was used to say, that chick's a BUDJU, like that chick's good looking or attractive. Okay. So yeah, my mates call me BUDJU. So not many people know that.
No, don't worry. I got some information.
So where'd you get that from, bro?
Okay, don't worry about that.
Not giving away your sources.
No, not my sources. Okay, so and is this still commonly used in Darwin, or is that more in your local group that was using that?
Oh no, it's man, like the slang in Darwin is nothing. It's like nothing I've heard anywhere else in Australia.
Like unless you live, if you walked into Darwin now, you sat at a restaurant or a bar, you wouldn't know what the hell they're saying.
Yeah, I mean, it depends what groups you're with. Like some people will use it to take the piss.
Yeah.
But then like other people, like that's how they talk.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember like playing rugby against some guys, and I was like, someone would say something to me, I'm like, what the fuck did he just say? It's like, oh, blah blah blah, and they would like just.
Yeah, they can. I used to live on the Gold Coast. I went to school at Griffith. I did a study abroad for a year, and I had some buddies from Ipswich. I can't remember. Way inland Gold Coast. And it took me like 6 months to figure out what the hell they were saying. Like, it's very twangy, these like inlanders, I'd say, in some parts of Australia. And the sentences just run on. It seems like one giant word. So it's... Yeah, it was difficult even for me when I was there, and I can't imagine if you're like a non-native English speaker being in Australia.
Oh, man.
Like,
yeah,
it's got to be difficult. Speaking about being on the piss, so there's a bit of a story I heard. Let's go back real far. 2003, you're in Sydney. You're at your mate's house, and you fell down the stairs and fractured your skull, and your buddy walked right by you. Do you want to talk about that story? You can skip it if you want.
No, man, that's. Fuck, you have done some research. That's it's not exactly how it happened.
Okay. Because you can call out your buddy that might have told me.
Well, what had actually happened, I'd gone out. It was like a Thursday night. I'd gone out after rugby training and went to a mate's, I think it was like, I don't know, birthday, 18th, 19th, 20th or something like that.
So 2003, what age? You're about 19, 20 at this?
I was 18.
18, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Went out on the piss, was double fisting, got fucked up, don't remember anything. A couple of days later, I connected all this afterwards. But one of my mates, I think it was the guy whose birthday party I'd gone to, apparently I was on the phone to him telling him I was in the back of a paddy wagon.
All right.
And I don't remember any of that. So anyway, I don't recall that. All I remember is like waking up at my front door, like 7 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning or something, going inside and just like feeling fucked. Like my head was throbbing. I felt like shit. I slept all day. This was Friday. I was supposed to be in the city for a course.
Yeah.
Obviously didn't make that. So I slept all day Friday night, slept all day Saturday, got up like Saturday afternoon, went into the lounge room to try and watch the footy. And just like the lights and the colors and the sound was just making my head throb. And I was like, man, this is the worst hangover I've had. Like, this is horrible. So I went to sleep that night and then woke up the next day and was still in the same state. And I was like, all right, this is not cool. Like, I've done something here. So yeah, I ended up riding myself with no helmet, like a dickhead, to Royal North Shore Hospital and like checking myself in there. And then... yeah, they did all the scans and stuff like that. And, you know, the next week was a little bit of a blur. I ended up in intensive care and was in there for a week. And I just remember I was kind of like coming to, dozing off, coming to. I remember coming to one time and like my mum was next to my bed and I was like, what's going on? How'd you get here? And she told me of this premonition where she was, 3 hours away in the Blue Mountains or just outside the Blue Mountains.
Yep. And
I think she said she was watching TV or something and she saw my face in like a hospital bed on TV. And she turned around, my stepdad at the time was like, something's happened to Shaun.
Yeah.
And then she started like calling people and checking up and blah, blah, blah. Like I wasn't answering my phone or anything like that. And then I think she got hold of one of my mates that I lived with and came and like found me.
So what you had a concussion, fractured skull, or
yeah, I had a fractured skull
from falling down the stairs. Or
well,
you don't know.
I've got no idea.
No idea.
All I know was again looking back at putting it together afterwards, maybe I was being a fucking menace.
Maybe
and someone slogged me.
Yeah.
And then I ended up in a paddy wagon. I assume the police like checked my driver's license and just like left me at the front door. And then one of the boys, I think both the boys actually like got up and walked out the door.
Just walked past you,
like on the way to work, and just like, oh fuck, Cobes, what are you doing, mate?
It's okay. So, we won't go too much blast from the past, but one more story. Tell us about the time you nearly died in a rugby match. What happened there?
So got back from Afghanistan 2011. Actually, whilst I was in Afghanistan, one of the rugby mafia, who was a high-ranking officer, had come out to our patrol base and was like, hey, Defence Force Rugby World Cup is on this year. Get in contact with the coach, get in contact with the strength and conditioning coach, start putting together, training program, blah, blah, blah. Once you get back, you're going to have a trial match in Canberra. You've got an opportunity to represent Australia in Defence Force World Cup. I was like, all right, sweet. So got back from that trip. Everyone else went on holidays, went and did their own thing, visiting family, friends, etc. And I was like, I'm getting stuck in rugby. I'm going to make this team. Mm-hmm. So I did that, flew down to Canberra, played in a trial match down there, played well, got selected, then went into camp. It was a two-month camp. So we had about, I think, 4 weeks or so where we're playing, we're training, we're playing just like exhibition matches against other teams.
This was to go to play on the international team, so I didn't understand that. Like, what level is it you're going towards?
Still amateur.
Amateur, okay.
But like fairly high level. Like some of the guys that we played against had like professional rugby contracts and things like that. So, so I made that team. We went into camp, spent about a month traveling around Australia, playing exhibition matches, training, etc. Competition kicked off. We played all of our games in Sydney and Canberra. Top 4 teams out of 12 went to New Zealand, played in the semi-finals, finals. We beat Samoan Police in the semi-final, went to the final, and then played against the British Army. Mm-hmm. And we had a number of injuries, obviously from 2 months in camp, penultimate game, and we had a number of injuries. A couple of guys went off, people got shifted around different positions, etc. And one of their British Army players had made a break. He was a Fijian international. He was running down the sideline. I came across as fullback to make a cover tackle, and as I made the tackle, I kind of hit him and swung around him. And as I swung around him, my winger was like chasing back and had basically gone to tackle him at the same time. And I swung around him and my face just went with his thigh. And I just went, I don't remember this obviously, but apparently I just like hit the ground face first and just took a deep breath in, breath out, and didn't move. And I don't remember anything except for a couple of minutes later, being on the sideline, kind of coming to, having all these people around me and like trying to sit up and trying to run back out on the field. And everyone's like, whoa, dude, you've been out for minutes, man. Like, stay the fuck where you are. Don't move. So
did your heart stop or?
I've got no idea.
Jesus Christ. That's the dangers of rugby. You guys are lunatics out there.
Yeah.
You're not wearing equipment. I see I'm a hockey player, but even rugby's next level. I mean, at least we got equipment on out there. My God. Okay. Well, that was our blast from the past. I got some inside information. I don't think it was too.
That was solid, man.
Yeah, I don't think it was too demeaning. Okay, I wanted to have a quick chat about a little bit more into like your strength and conditioning with Petr Yan, and also just on his last fight, because in my opinion, I still think he's the champion. Whatever happened last time was just it's not just sad, but it's like. It's almost unheard of. This has rarely happened to the UFC. What are your thoughts on his last fight, his performance, and that decision?
First of all, the decision, man. Like, I can't argue it.
Correct. Yeah.
I mean, he's a professional. He should know the rules.
Yep.
I like the guy. He's one of my clients. Really fucking good dude. Really talented guy. But I mean, this is your craft, right? Like, you got to know the rules.
Well, it seems, I guess, I don't want to say the word on the street, but like the media says that someone from his corner said, hit him. And is that true, or is there a little bit more of inside information? It's really hard to tell at that point.
Yeah, I mean, again, like, yes, it is a team sport, but at the end of the day, like, it's up to the individual in the cage at the time to make the decision. So, again, regardless of whether or not, and like, I've spoken to him, man, like, he's 100% accountable. Like, it doesn't matter who said what or how it's portrayed in the media. Like, he fucked up. Yeah, you know, he knows that. So he's dealing with the consequences right now. So that's the first thing. Second thing is, mate, the dude's a beast. Like, Aljamain Sterling threw everything he had at him.
He was done. He
just fucking absorbed everything, came back, started picking him apart. Like, that's what Petr Yan is so good at, man. Like, he's so talented. He's so intelligent as well. Like, his fight IQ is incredible. You know, you got to think, man, like, that's got to be so fucking demoralizing for Aljamain Sterling.
He stuffed him on every takedown.
Yeah, to be like, right, this is my game plan. I'm gonna flurry, and I'm gonna take this guy down. I'm gonna take his back and choke him out. And it's like, every time he did that, like, he ended up on his back himself, right? Like, you're not gonna want to fight that dude again, and that's why he's been ducking.
This guy is he's an animal. I was following Petr Yan before, around his first UFC fight. Now, it wasn't that. It was primarily because he was at Tiger, so I like to follow the Tiger fighters. And he was fighting I used to, there was a kid, he's
Teruto
Ishihara, but he's from Alpha Male. And the jiu-jitsu coach at Alpha Male is a guy named Michael Malott. This guy used to be my neighbor as a kid. So he's about 5 years younger, but we know each other's families very well. So I followed that gym. I was actually following his guy first, and then I'm like, oh, he's fighting who is this Petr Yan guy? And that's when I started following. And then after every fight, I'm like, this. Not only does he get better, because his boxing's ridiculous, he doesn't slow down. Every single round, you're watching. Some people are saying like, yeah, he gets better in the later rounds, but when you watch him specifically, the other guys are getting worse.
Yeah.
He's not, he's just like a Mack truck. It's very stable. He's ripping through the guys, but his stamina is on another level. Do you notice that in the gym and strength and conditioning? His VO2 max must be through the roof.
Yeah, 100%, man. That's exactly what we train.
Yeah.
Right. Like, when he first came to me, like, he was a smaller guy. You know, I watched a number of his previous fights before he joined the UFC, and you know, he was known for that. He was known for, you know, he put a few dudes out, but he was known for volume and just touching guys a lot. So, you know, I saw that. I saw he had an amazing aerobic base. So I was like, right, we need to add some strength, add some speed, add some power. You know, so instead of just putting a lot of touches on guys, you know, making sure that when he touches them, they don't want to engage.
Yeah.
So, you know, that was a lot of focus, was once we gone through the first couple of fight camps after he made it, or once he leading into his debut. You know, he was a new guy. I hadn't really worked with too many fighters at that stage. As a strength and conditioning coach, you know, I train athletes, and if I can make someone more athletic, then that's typically going to carry over to, you know, being able to perform at their craft, whatever that may be. In this case, it was fighting. So, you know, once we got working together, it was all about building that foundation. I'm assessing where he's at. I'm having a look at, you know, his strengths, his weaknesses, going through a fighter analysis, and then putting together a training plan that's going to allow me to build a foundation, but also tie in with, you know, who he's fighting, what his game plan is. And once we got a couple of fight camps under our belt together, then, you know, each fight became a little bit more specific because, again, you know, going back to that team environment, if I'm working with a rugby team, then I've got them for 6 to 8 months of the year, right? I've got them for, you know, off season, pre-season, in season, you know, peaking at the right times.
And for him, do you just have him for the camp, like 8 weeks or 6 weeks?
Yeah. So I've only ever had him for the camps, which is sometimes only 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks.
But he's here the whole year anyway. So when he's not in camp, is he training with you?
No, he's not here all year.
Oh, really? Okay,
Yeah,
I must have just saw. I was training at Unit 27 a couple Octobers ago, and I did 10 days, and I saw him out there. But I don't like to bother people. Anyway, so he's just coming in for his camps, and then he goes back to Russia, or?
Yeah, pretty much. Obviously, like a couple of years ago, he was spending a lot more time here as, you know, a base to then build him up, and, you know, his manager's out here and he's fighting to get him in, you know, different organizations, different fights and things like that. So, you know, he spent a lot more time out here back then. But, you know, over the last couple of years, he's spent a lot more time at home. He's got a family.
Yeah, now I think he's at Top Team, or I think he was in the U.S.
Yeah, he was in the U.S. and
probably because of COVID.
That's because of COVID.
Oh, sorry, the C word. We're gonna get shadow banned just for that.
It's all right. It's all right. No worries.
So yeah, and one of the main questions I want to ask, from that initial fight, starting in the UFC to where he is today, and as you were his strength and conditioning coach. Specifically, what have you seen him improve in the most, whether it's in the martial arts side or the endurance or the conditioning? What can you say? Like, because again, it's a very long-winded question, but I'll get it out. It's kind of, he is getting better and better, but how much more better can this guy even get? And so back to the main question, what have you seen him improve on in the most since he started with you?
To be honest, I think he's paying more attention to the data. So John Hutchinson, the boxing coach at Tiger, like, he's been in, I think, in his fight camps almost as long as me, just as long. He kind of came on board, I think maybe his second fight or something. So Johnny's been involved in a number of his fight camps as well, and he was over in the US with Top Team, American Top Team, putting him through his paces over there. Now, obviously, he's fighting against Aljamain Sterling, so, you know, a lot more grappling and things like that, far less boxing. He wasn't doing any strength and conditioning over there. Yep. And that's something that Johnny said to me. I interviewed him for my podcast, and he was like, man, you know, we missed you in that fight. Missed that conditioning, missed that snap in his punches, missed that power, that anaerobic base. But he said, like, you're really going to look forward to working with him next time because he's starting to pay attention to his body. He's not just hammering himself all the time. And, you know, you have to manage this as people get older, particularly, you know, these fighters, man, if they're going to be putting their bodies through the fucking ringer all year round, like, you've got to take that time to do some maintenance work. You've got to look after the body, right? Because if you don't look after the body, then you're going to get injured. You're not going to be able to fight. You're not going to be able to be as active. That means you know, instead of progressing and improving, then you're kind of staying where you are, potentially even moving backwards. So
he's focusing primarily just on the data to be as optimal as he can as an athlete. Yeah,
I think he's a very intelligent guy, and he doesn't have a head coach, so he just kind of manages his own thing and does whatever's necessary. But I think he's understanding a little bit more that, you know, there's different things that he needs to focus on at different times, instead of just being one of those people that's just like, all right, I've just got to do more grind. You know, all right, well, I've got a decent base here. Maybe I don't need to do as much of that. Maybe I can, you know, maintain that for the next couple of months whilst I progress these skills and drills, etc. So I think, you know, he's getting better at understanding those different things that he needs, and then being able to structure a solid training plan. What
are your thoughts on John Danaher? He has a school of thought, and with Gordon Ryan, which I'm sure you're familiar with all these guys. His school of thought is that these guys like Gordon Ryan, if they're very good at one thing, that is what we will continue to teach, and that is it. Because once you start spreading yourself too thin, then you're not very good at one thing. You're very good at many things. Mm-hmm. And I think that could be applied to Petr Yan. His boxing is his thing, right? Now, but he has, as he reaches new levels in the UFC, he has to maybe focus on the jiu-jitsu, the wrestling, the takedown defense. So that time is not being focused on the boxing. So that takes it away, or the strength and conditioning. Do you agree with that, or do you agree in MMA as you get up in the rankings, you do need to spread yourself thin?
I think having a base foundation of like one style, I think that's very important because, you know, again, you want to be very good at something and continue improving that. Now, that's obviously going to tie into, you know, game plan. It's going to tie into training, etc. You know, here's the thing, man. Here's how I like to explain it. If you got someone, let's say you're playing the UFC game on PlayStation, right? And you've got an avatar and you've only got 100 points to dedicate to strength, speed, power, stamina, wrestling, offense, defense, striking, blah, 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 right? Like how many, if you're already very high level at one of those things, you know, how many more points? You have to put in more and more and more effort to just add the smallest increments. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you get to a decent level there, then you can go, all right, my striking's very good. All right, what do I need to improve? I need to improve my takedown defense so I can keep it standing, so I can play my fight game. Yeah. Right, that might mean I need to work on a little bit more anaerobic conditioning. I need to be a little bit stronger or a little bit more powerful. You know, so obviously having one of these bases, but then like a very good base, but then also looking at all of the other different aspects that come into it that's going to allow you to utilize those skills that you're already very good at. I think that's important, man. And again, that's going to be different for, you know, different opponents
and how
different game plans.
Let's say strength and conditioning. It's not how to say, it's not a martial art, let's say, but it's probably like, for example, if I'm a striker and my boxing and my Muay Thai are great, my jiu-jitsu's okay, but I don't have time to train jiu-jitsu. For me personally, I would say, well, then put all your time on strength and conditioning, because is that not a hidden gem in the sport of UFC that maybe fighters are not focusing on enough? Do you agree with that? Do you think that they should be focusing more on strength and conditioning? Do you see that? Is this something that's trending over the past 5 years? Because I could imagine 10 years ago, this probably did not exist in UFC.
Yeah.
Or in MMA
it's a great question. And I think it is a little bit untapped. It is becoming a little bit more of a focus, I think, for fighters, just as, you know, nutrition is. Yeah. And, you know, a periodized training, nutrition, recovery plan. I think a lot more people are realizing the benefits of it. Because, I mean, at the end of the day, like I just said, you know, you could spend all this time, energy, and effort into developing this one skill, but once you get to a certain level, like there's a point of diminishing returns, right? Mm-hmm. So where can we better invest that time, energy, and effort so that we can, you know, improve other areas, which is going to allow us to utilize our main skills or our base. So it's the same thing with nutrition. You know, it's becoming a lot more prevalent these days. Fighters are becoming a lot more aware of, you know, like cutting weight intelligently without, you know, smashing themselves, without taking too much away from their ability to perform in their training sessions, their ability to recover between training sessions, but also their ability to put on a performance on the night, right? Like if you deplete too much, then like if you deplete too much through fight camp, whatever, 8-week fight camp, then you're not actually getting better at your skills, right? You're just fucking grinding.
Yep.
and like you're not actually improving. And of course, there's going to be a component that you need to grind, you need to put in the effort, right? But again, like that, at some point, that becomes detrimental. Yeah. So, you know, I think having a plan to allow people to reduce weight over time, start cutting body fat, but also eat enough in the right, you know, enough energy, right nutrients, right ratios to fuel that performance, so they're actually getting better. Yeah, and then recovery as well, so they can back up those training sessions.
A lot more to it than just the martial art itself as well.
Yeah.
Okay, well, just because it's 4 and you got to get out to the beach. So I'm sure we could talk for hours still, but on a final note, because I don't want to be on schedule. Anyways, on a final note, what are you doing now? Is there anything that you want to talk about Swiss 8? We wish we didn't get too much time to talk about Be Spunky. I did want to talk about that, so maybe you can address the camera and where people can find you, your YouTube, your Instagram, if they want to do coaching. Man, you got too many hats, man. I don't know what to say.
Yeah, actually with us here in the live, Be Spunky.
Be Spunky is live.
All the
don't worry, we're gonna get a clip for you. It's coming right now.
Yeah, so I'm obviously an ambassador for Swiss 8, which I've already spoken about, but also Be Spunky. So Be Spunky is a male hormone optimization supplement that essentially replaces a lot of other bullshit supplements. It's a nutraceutical, so comes from natural sources, and you know, we spoke about this earlier off camera. It's not necessarily like testosterone production boosting. Okay, it's more about like managing stress and allowing your body to get into a state where it can produce its own testosterone to allow you to function optimally. So yeah, I'm affiliated with Be Spunky. Shout out to Shaun, legend of a guy. And yeah.
And where can they find Be Spunky? How can people connect?
bespunky.com.au. Use the code COBES10.
COBES 10
discount.
COBES 10, KOBES.
That's right.
10. Also, you can find them on Instagram. Probably just at Be Spunky.
At Be Spunky, BESPUNKI.
Awesome.
News for them coming out soon. I'm not sure when Shaun's going to release that, but just a little heads up. Swiss 8 is an app which you can find, swiss8.org. Again, to allow you to structure and schedule 8 pillars of health and wellness via an app on your phone.
Yep.
You can find me at Coach Kobes, that is KOBES, Coach_Kobes on Instagram. YouTube is Performance Functional Training, and my podcast is Live, Train, Perform.
Perfect. So we'll find you on that. We've plugged ourselves enough. I'm not one to talk about my stuff. It will sell itself. It's so awesome. So I won't even tell you. All right. Thanks a lot, Shaun Kober, on our podcast today. And next week we will be dealing with a 5-star Marine. They are doing a lot of charity work around the islands of Phuket with One Phuket, and they're kind of the same connection. Nando, he was on our first podcast. He explained a little bit about that, but Shaun, another Shaun, is coming on as well, and we're going to dive deep into that. So stay tuned, and we're out. Thanks a lot, guys.
Cheers.
I think that was our better one. Time just will go so fast.
Oh, dude, I was like 30 minutes ago, I was like, oh, sweet, got 30 minutes.
No.
Boom.
Once you sit there, man, it goes like this.
Yeah.